Hey everybody, as always Jarek here, and if I seem incredibly tired, that's because I just got done streaming one of the most forgettable FPSs of all time. I woke up today thinking about what I could cover this week. I usually have this pre-planned, but I had nothing on my mind. I scrolled through my entire Steam library, didn't feel like covering any of those games, so I decided to look to my Discord. In my Discord, I have a channel where people can request games for me to cover. Well, back in 2019, I pinned someone saying Syndicate, and then promptly forgot that game existed. But what makes this game so forgettable? Well, I'll answer that question after today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Frag Pro Shooter, which is a mobile shooter with 60 million users and 1 million daily active users. In this game, your goal is to destroy the enemy bunkers. First one to do so wins. There are over 80 characters to collect, allowing you to customize your own strategy. And of course, with a game like this, there is always new content being released, like the most recent character, Takashi. There are numerous different game modes to play, but the one I will talk about is 2v2. You get to build your team with one of your friends or a random partner you come across online. You choose 3 characters from a deck of 6, while your partner gets the other 3. And as the name suggests, you play against 2 other players. So basically it's doubles. I'm kind of a more competitive person when it comes to games, so doubles is always what I go to. Especially with how much Halo I played, I love doubles. If you want to try this game out for yourself, you can get some extra rewards by checking out that link down below in the video information. Again, keep in mind you only get these rewards if you click that link down below. The rewards are a golden chest, 500 coins, and 50 diamonds worth $6. Again, a big thanks goes out to Frag Pro Shooter for sponsoring this channel. Syndicate is a reboot of a tactical isometric game that came out in '93. So how 2012 is it to reboot it as a first-person shooter? I played this on PC, and the PC port for the most part is very 2012. It's fine, but lacking a lot of options. And yes, this means there's no FOV slider. Thankfully, someone cared about this game enough to mod it, and there's just a simple DLL file that you can drag and drop into the folder, and now you have whatever FOV you wanted. I set it to 90, and the weird thing is this didn't break anything. In fact, if I didn't tell you this, you might not have even known unless you played the game beforehand. So the fact that there's no FOV slider is odd to me, but again, also very 2012. This was the late 360 era. Games were kind of being held back by a console that had stuck around for a bit longer than it needed to. The current trend at the time was to push as many post-processing effects as you can, and oh boy, did they certainly do that in this game. There is so much bloom in this game. At times, it's blinding. This is something I remember distinctly about Syndicate back in the day. The bizarre thing is that the game looks actually okay for a 2012 title. There really wasn't any need for so much post-processing effects to be shoved into the game. At times you get glimpses of the outside world without all this bloom shoved into your face, and it genuinely is good looking. However, almost any time there's a brighter source of light, it's going to wash out your entire screen and block you from seeing the game at all. I'm making it sound like it's unplayable. It's not unplayable, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm complaining more than I really am. It's just so bizarre. Anyway, with that rant aside, the graphics are actually pretty good for 2012. Textures hold up for games of its time, faces are readable, which is a lot more than what you can say about other games of its time, and animations are overall pretty good. This is all to be expected. Starbreeze games usually pass the graphics test. Oh, also, did I mention this was made by Starbreeze? Keep that in your mind, I'll talk about it later. For now, we'll move on to the story, and this is where things start to go downhill. As I'm sure you've already noticed, this game is a cyberpunk game. Companies have become so powerful that they control the world, so basically modern day America. Technology has advanced to the point of where everyone has a chip in their brain and they can access the datanet whenever they please. You play as a character named Kilo, and just like anyone else, you have a chip in your brain. However, you work for one of these mega corporations, unlike the lowly people in the ghetto streets. This was one of my biggest complaints about the story of this game. Not that you work for one of the companies, that's fine, more so that it never explored the world as a whole. Yeah, you get to walk through these slums occasionally, but you never truly get to see the impact this has on people's lives. In fact, all of the NPCs seem to be the same copy-paste cut job that exists just to scream and get shot. The story itself is very unfocused. There's a few key characters, but there's no real obvious goal. You're just kind of taking mission to mission. Even though the story didn't seem to have any obvious direction or goal, some things were still laughably predictable. For example, at the beginning of the game, you're introduced to this guy.
Come on, gotta breach the controls, let's go.
This is dude just murdering everyone for no reason.
Sir? Sir, Aspari Security. Situation is under control. You can step out.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, he basically always acts like a psychopath, and right away I knew he was going to become one of the enemy bosses even though he was on my side. And wouldn't you know it, he was the final boss of the game. Syndicate does kind of try to go somewhere with the main twist. As it turns out, one of these mega corporations marched into your parents' home, murdered them, and abducted you when you were a child. Your entire life has been a lie. But then they kind of don't really do anything with that. You also find this out, I would say, around 70% of the way through the game, and before that you were just shooting NPCs without much more thought. As things turn out, the head scientist of this mega corporation had been working on the inside to try to take it down. She had a plan that turned some people against this corporation, and by the end of the game everything's on fire. I have no idea what this plan was. I don't really know what's going on. Sure, I guess. Like I said, this story is very skin deep. For the most part, it's just an excuse to have you go shoot more enemies. For a game that involves mega corporations taking over the world and removing my freedom, didn't make me think a whole lot. But now we get to the gameplay, which usually can be enough to save games, but not this one. Underneath all that cyberpunk bloom, this game does very little to distinguish itself from other first-person shooters of its time. Now you'd think being able to hack anything would be a pretty big deal, but it's really not. The game will quickly give you 3 different abilities. The first one is suicide. Yep, you can hack into somebody's brain and make them commit suicide. This also has the side effect of their head exploding, killing anyone nearby. The next ability is backfire, which does exactly as you would assume. Their gun backfires, leaving them vulnerable. Meanwhile, the last ability lets you hijack an opponent and effectively take them on your side. Once all enemies in the area have been killed, he will kill himself. The cooldown for these abilities is just to kill more enemies. You also have the ability to hack things in the general area, which is not on cooldown. You can do that as much as you want. If you see a turret nearby, you can hack it and make it yours. Some of the heavy enemies also have shields that you need to hack before you can do damage to them, and they're rather bullet spongy. This never quite annoyed me because they're presented in a way that's obvious that they have more health. Now all of this sounds like it would be interesting, but ultimately in the end of the day, the best and most effective thing to do is just to shoot the enemies. It really does play out like a standard first-person shooter with a few extra gimmicks tacked on. So it's at least a good thing that the guns are pretty satisfying to shoot. These have nice recoil, they sound nice and punchy, and the designs are quite unique. Bro, this bloom, I cannot see a thing. One of these weapons takes notes directly from resistance and allows your bullets to lock onto an enemy, which is very useful for shooting around corners. My personal favorite is this death ray of a laser beam. It will light enemies on fire, and the split function will just vaporize them. Oh my! And this game might honestly have the most satisfying chain gun I have ever used in any game. Listen to this! Unfortunately though, these weapons are the one standout in this game. The enemies are not particularly engaging to fight, and the movement is really clunky. The best way I can describe the movement in this game is that you were playing a third-person shooter in first person. Everything feels like there's a slight delay, like you have to wait for your legs to actually start moving when you press forward. To make things worse, you can't start sprinting if you're strafing in any way. I think I figured out why sprinting that's why sprinting feels so bad to me. I can sprint if I'm just walking forward, but if I'm holding like a strafe key and forward at the same time, I can't sprint. So like right now I'm holding W and D, so forward and right, and it's not letting me sprint. I have to specifically be looking forward and holding W and only W. What's even more confusing about this is that if I'm already sprinting, I can press the straight buttons and it'll keep sprinting, so I don't know why this happens. And then there comes to the other very 2012 thing. My god, there is so much head bob in this game. Any animation you do has your head shaking all over the place. That's not how the human mind works. You're going to stabilize your movements pretty well. And then you add to the fact that you have to wait for any animation to end before you can do anything else. For example, if you decide to swap weapons from your assault rifle to your revolver, you have to put the assault rifle away, pull out the revolver, cock it, point it, then you can start sprinting or do whatever else you wanted to do. Like I said, it feels really clunky and not particularly satisfying. Syndicate also features a skill tree, but it's so amazingly pointless. There's nothing in here that's interesting at all. Everything in here is something along the lines of have more health, have faster health regen, carry more ammo. None of this stands out. None of this is changing the game in any way. If they wanted to have a skill tree and make the game actually interesting, they should have put more abilities in here. Make combat different by utilizing the skill tree. Instead, as it stands, no one's going to point out something that they unlocked. They're just going to take the most useful skill out of the skill tree and call it that. For that matter, the entire game is so scripted and so linear that everyone is going to have the same experience and then be a one and done. If you look up a long play of Syndicate on YouTube, virtually every single long play is the same length. This is always a bad sign. It means players do not have freedom to express themselves in-game. Generally, these games end up being incredibly repetitive and not very interesting. Just like Syndicate. Oh, also it's only around 4.5 hours long. The one thing that's kind of different in this game from other shooters of its time are the boss battles. These are really hit or miss. You can fight a boss who will make clones of himself, and I thought this one was pretty fun. Or you can fight another boss where you're standing there just holding the F key down at every rocket he tries to shoot at you. And then after you beat him, the game crashes and you have to do it all over again. There has to be something made for it. This be like a mouse injector or a specific build for it that allows you to do that. The game just closed for literally no reason. Okay. The Raging Hamster, thanks for falling. Are you kidding me, dude? I think the worst offender is the final boss of the game, though. Alongside this final boss are two heavies. You have to hack their shield, shoot them a bunch until they eventually go down. Thing is, they can revive each other, which is not a mechanic used anywhere else in the game. So naturally, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I just kept shooting them and thinking, well, maybe I have to kill the final boss to stop this? But no. After you down them, you just have to run over and press melee, which kills them. Okay, cool. This honestly adds nothing to the final boss. We had done this time and time again throughout the game. But once you kill these two heavies, you fight the final boss in the same exact way, which again, we've done this tons of times throughout the game. It's not interesting or new. And once his health bar finally depletes, you walk up to him and it starts a cutscene where it starts beating the crap out of you because nothing can ever be easy. Spoiler, at the end of this cutscene, you mash the E button until he dies, because that's rewarding a quick time event. Speaking of mashing the E button, you're going to be doing that a lot in this game. Anytime you need to open a door, anytime you need to get into an event, anytime you need to do anything, it has you mash the E button. This is such a small thing, but it's really annoying. Why can't I just hold the button down? Why do I need to mash E? This is another example of being a product of its time. This was common back in 2012. I hated it back then and I hate it now. Speaking of hating it back then and hating it now, Skrillex was a thing. Remember when he was relevant? Yeah, dubstep's in this game. It's garbage. It's like someone shoved house into a paper shredder. I play it for you, but that means I have to listen to it. Also, it's probably in YouTube's Content ID system, so I'm not going to do that. So yeah, this is one of the most forgettable games I've ever played. It was a one and done back in the day, and then I promptly forgot about it. I do remember being pretty disappointed though, because this game, again, was made by Starbreeze Studios, and they had made some fantastic games in the past. They're responsible for the Chronicles of Riddick games, they're responsible for The Darkness 1, which is one of my favorite games of all time. What happened seems pretty obvious. EA looked at an old identity, an old IP, and said, what's popular right now? Hey Starbreeze, turn that into a shooter. People like shooters, right? Make exactly what they're doing. It's obvious Starbreeze didn't have much freedom with this game. It's not like every product Starbreeze puts out is their own IP. The Darkness was a comic before it was a game. Chronicles of Riddick was a movie. Yet those two games are some of the most unique, original games I have ever played. So I don't think it's a coincidence that EA happened to be publishing this game and it ended up being one of Starbreeze's most forgettable, boring games. Apparently other people agree because this game flopped so hard it resulted in Starbreeze splitting up, with some of them making Machine Games, who would go on to make the Wolfenstein reboots. Now before you go, oh yeah, but Youngblood's so bad, keep in mind, these reboots originally were fantastic, and they just seemed like a Starbreeze game. So maybe for a short while this breakup was a good thing. For now though, that sums up everything I wanted to say. Huge thanks to everyone that joined me over on Twitch. I'm getting so close to becoming a Twitch partner. I'm going to make a push over this next week or two to try to get everything I need to become one. If you want to join me, my Twitch is twitch.tv/JarekTheGamingDragon. If you subscribe, you get to see my videos ahead of time. And also a big thanks goes to my sponsor, Frag Pro Shooter. Check that link down below in the video information if you want to try it out for yourself. As always, thank all of you for watching this video. I'll see you next time.